House Bill 1. Representative Lang. Mr. Clerk, read the bill.
House Bill 1, a bill for an act concerning alternative treatment for serious diseases causing chronic pain and debilitating conditions. Third reading this House bill.
Representative Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about this for some time, not just this year, but for the last 4 years. Before I proceed, I wish to thank the advocates, some of whom are in the gallery. I wish to thank a whole bunch of people, including Senator Hayne, who sat around a table for a very long time to try to make this the best bill in the country. I believe we have done that. The title of this bill is the compassionate use of medical cannabis. I would like you in this chamber to focus on the word compassionate rather than on the word cannabis. That's not working. This bill is the most controlled and highly regulated bill ever drafted, ever written in the United States of America. 20 other states and the District of Columbia allow for the use of medical marijuana to provide a higher quality of life for very sick individuals, some of whom are dying, some of whom are not, but have medical conditions that require the use of this product for their quality of life. We took the mistakes that other states made and fixed those mistakes. So someone on this floor might say, well, they made a mess of it in California, Representative. And you know what? They did. They had a very loose piece of legislation, and pretty much anybody in California who has a doctor willing to sign a piece of paper for whatever reason can get their hands on medical marijuana. And of course, it's been abused in California. We have fixed that mistake. We have done so by requiring many things. First, a patient must have a bona fide relationship with a physician licensed in the state of Illinois. The physician must certify that the patient has one of 33 specifically named medical conditions in the statute. So if you don't have a bona fide medical condition, or if you don't have one of those listed in the statute, you ain't getting the product. And to prove this, you then need to take the physician's recommendation and all of your medical records, proving this disease or medical condition to the Department of Public Health, who's going to pore over those records and make sure you have that bona fide relationship and make sure you have that disease. That patient, along with their caregiver, is going to have a background check, and most of them will be fingerprinted. And none of them that don't pass muster will get the product. And so if they're a felon, or if they have a drug offense that they've been convicted of, they're not getting the product. This background check goes for not just the patients and the caregivers, but the growers and the dispensaries, whether it be the owners or whether it be every employee working in those facilities. Every purchase made is limited, and every purchase made goes into a database that's accessible not only by every dispensary, but everyone in law enforcement in the state of Illinois, so that they know who's buying, they know what they're buying, and they know where it's going. This bill has reflected the concerns of law enforcement, although truth be told, not all law enforcement is for the bill. But I will say many in law enforcement appreciate the work that we've done and have gone neutral on the bill. The bill deals with DUI issues in a very strong way. Today, if you're taking OxyContin for your colon cancer and you drive and a policeman stops you because he thinks or she thinks that you've been driving recklessly and maybe are under the influence of something, they can't make you take a field sobriety test. This bill requires every medical marijuana patient who's stopped to provide implied consent to a field sobriety test. And just as in an alcohol situation, if you don't walk the line or you don't take the field sobriety test, you lose your license to drive. That is not the test for any other drugs in the state of Illinois, any other issue, any other pharmaceutical, just marijuana if this bill were to pass. The bill provides strong rules to allow employers to make whatever rules and regulations they wish to make on the job site. If they say no marijuana here, there's no marijuana there. The same for landlords. Landlords can say to a tenant, you can live here, but you can't use that stuff in my building. The bill also provides that local communities can create whatever zoning they need to make sure that dispensaries are moved to wherever they want them within the community. They can't zone them out because that would be discriminatory against very sick people. But they can decide where in their communities they want them to be. This bill provides strong rulemaking authority to the Department of Public Health, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. These rules were written, these provisions in the bill creating strong rulemaking was written with the governor's office, who support this rulemaking. As I said before, the state police are neutral on this bill, but they would tell you that they appreciate all the efforts that we have gone to try to deal with each and every issue they have had, particularly the DUI issue. Let me point out that this bill is no longer House Bill 30. It's no longer a bill we had some years ago regarding grow your own. This is not grow your own. This provides for 22 growers, and the reason we picked 22 is one for each state police district so that we don't overburden the state police with inspections. And it provides a maximum of 60 dispensaries to be scattered around the state of Illinois by some rules that the department would put together to make sure that everyone in Illinois who needs this product has access to it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not about getting high. It's not about dope. It's not about what our mothers told us when we went to college. This is about providing a product at no expense to the taxpayers to provide better health care to people who desperately need this product. There are people in the gallery today. Many of you know Jim Champion, who's sitting way at the top in his wheelchair, a veteran with MS, who is crumpled much of the time unless he uses a little marijuana. And it's not always smoked. Sometimes it's vaporized. Sometimes it's in a cookie or brownie. But when he is able to access that product, and I hesitate to tell you how he accesses the product, it's not a pretty sight. When he accesses that product, his hands open up, his legs uncrumple, and he is able to enjoy a better quality of life. There are grannies in this state, ladies and gentlemen, with colon cancer who are terminal, who simply want to be able to enjoy their grandchildren or go to the movies or maybe even do their laundry. There are 30 and 40-year-olds who are desperately ill who want to continue to work. We had a press conference last week with a woman from Rockford. The woman from Rockford has stage 4 terminal pancreatic cancer. She is going to die. But she came here deathly ill to speak at the press conference. And what she said was that she had wasted away from about 125 pounds to about 80 pounds and couldn't eat and couldn't take care of herself. And when she started eating marijuana cookies and marijuana brownies, just like we were told when we were in college, she actually got the munchies. And she began to eat. And she gained 25 pounds. And she's able to enjoy her daughter at the park, which is all she wants to do for the rest of her life, enjoy a quality of life with her daughter. Pretend that it's your spouse, your parent, your child, your cousin, your neighbor. And their doctor says to them, you ought to be able to have this product because the Oxycontin, the Vicodin, the codeine, the morphine you're taking isn't working, or it's putting you flat on your back for days at a time and you can't do anything. And the doctor says, take this, eat that cookie, take a puff of this joint, if you want to call it that, and you can feel better. And it doesn't work for everyone, but it works for a lot of people. Ladies and gentlemen, 20 other states allow for this, and they allow for it in a way that isn't as controlled as this bill, isn't as detailed as this bill, isn't as regulated as this bill. Now, I know every single one of you has compassion in your heart. This is the day to show it. This is the day to get beyond politics. It's the day to get past elections. It's the day to talk about your constituents. I told someone earlier today when they told me that their police chief was opposed to it, I told them two things. First, the police are rarely for legalizing something that's illegal, especially involving medications. And second, there's a whole lot more sick people in your district than there are police chiefs. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is about the people in the gallery and their caregivers. This is about the people that live in our districts. This is about providing health care. The federal government spent 2 years and many billions of dollars providing Obamacare, which some of you like and some of you don't, but the bottom line is it's costing the taxpayers a big chunk of money. This is health care that won't cost us a dime. Let people feel better. Let them have a better quality of life. That's what this bill is about. I beg your aye votes.
The chair recognizes Representative Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't doubt that everyone on this floor knows how they're going to vote on this one way or the other. But I have been around for a long time and listened to the debate. And let me tell you that on this floor and on the Senate floor, when we actually had members who actually served as pharmacists, they gave testimony that there are drugs that are available that can do exactly what marijuana does. Now, there are those that you might disagree with that, but they were the experts that were on this floor. Now, if we're going down this path, the concern that I have is that the former speaker says the bill automatically says that you can't ban it from your community, even if your community agrees, because, see, that would be discriminatory, but you can place them somewhere. So that supposedly makes it better. You know, I have compassion, regardless, even if I vote no, I still have compassion for those who are suffering. And to try to make that plea that if we vote no, that we don't have compassion is totally wrong. There are needs, but there are already drugs out there available according to the experts. Every state that has implemented this has had problems. And it doesn't just stay with the community that needs this as far as their own medical need. It becomes a problem. It becomes a problem on the control of a substance which has been illegal for years. Now, you can either agree with it that it should be legal or say, no, it shouldn't be legal, but don't try to piecemeal it like this. If you want to come forward with a bill and say, let's legalize it, then let's legalize it. But to do this is just going to, I believe, cause confusion in our communities. The sponsor said that, we watched California and they had problems and we corrected those type problems. Well, then the other states passed it and then they had problems and they had to correct problems. So, but every state has had problems. And ladies and gentlemen, there's no doubt I will be voting no on this piece of legislation. And that doesn't shock anybody in this room. But I am telling you that there are many problems, if this does pass, that we, the state of Illinois, will have to deal with. Mark my word. Not going to throw a fit, not going to scream and yell, but I will guarantee you that we will be back adjusting this legislation, if this is the case, with other because of the problems that will occur, or will we be back on this floor to go ahead and move for the legalization of marijuana. I encourage a no vote.
The chair recognizes Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Indicates he will.
Representative, when you were giving the description of this, I think you omitted one part. This is a pilot program. And how long does this pilot program last for?
Thank you for asking that question. I had actually written that down because I did forget to mention that.
And you forgot it in committee, too. But
Yes,
this is an important
a 4-year pilot program. And it doesn't even become effective till January of 2014. And we did that so there'd be lots of lead time to prepare. And we did that, and in the bill, it allows the agencies 120 days to do rules. So it will be a very long time, at least a year, before anybody's licensed to grow or anyone's licensed to purchase, and probably a year and a half before anybody gets it in their hand. And this will give us time to make sure if there are changes, we can make those changes, if there's something we left out or something we need to adjust, and we can do it along the way as well. But 4 years from January 1st, 2014, this bill, this notion, this program will sunset unless it's renewed. And if it becomes a big mess, I won't be standing here on the floor trying to renew it. But I don't think it's not going to be a big mess. I think we're going to be proud that we did it. And the next time around, we'll have a lot more than the bare majority we're going to get today to support this.
Representative, you know that I've been here for a little while, and I can remember that I think it was my first year that you brought this bill forth, and there's been many, many times that I've asked you different things to be fixed and adjusted. One was grow your own. I couldn't support that. And you did do those things. You tightened this every time you came back and tightened it more and tightened it more. Not to be disrespectful to the previous speaker, but I believe that this is something that can be worked in and done properly. And if it isn't, I'll be looking for you in 4 years, because I am going to support this. And the reason I'm going to support this is because I've had one personal, where I had a friend come and live with me. He and his wife came for 2 solid years. He suffered with terminal cancer. I would not let him have marijuana in the house. I don't know if he got marijuana. I just know that the Oxycontin made him extremely sick, very sick. And my dear friend Ralph died 2 years ago. He never asked, only once, if he could have marijuana in the house, and I said no. Sometimes I resent that because I knew that it might have helped him. Last summer, I was called by a constituent who asked me to come to his home. I went to his home, and I saw firsthand what phantom pain is. Phantom pain, for those who don't know, is when you've lost your limbs. In his case, the 2 legs were amputated. He was in a wheelchair. His wife was there, and a caregiver was there. This man was in constant pain, and he told me the only time that he has relief from that pain is if he sends his wife out to purchase marijuana illegally and for him to have it in a brownie or some other way. But that's the only time that he feels that he can function. He can get up and actually know where he is, because the drugs that he was on just made his head not function right. He was always in a daze because of the Oxycontin he was on. I understand very well that there are people here in this chamber that can't vote for this. But I want to stand up and tell you that this is the right thing to do, because I feel that we do need compassion for these people that are suffering so hard. I saw it firsthand, and I'm really, really asking you to consider a 4-year pilot program. We do tons of pilot programs. Please, please consider giving a little compassion to those who are suffering so much. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Tryon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
Bill.
Every time this bill has come before this body, I have rose in opposition to it. Today I'm prepared to support it. But I want to tell you why that is. I think each of us have had constituents come to our office and give us constituent testimonials that are very hard to deny the benefits that they're receiving from the use of cannabis. The same individual who lost their legs in Representative Osmond's office has a minister who's a friend of his in my district. I visited with him. There was no drug that worked for his phantom leg pain. The only thing that worked for his pain was the use of cannabis. That was very convincing. But more so than that, other constituents that came forth and told me the effects that they were able to get were good. And if they could get it, why should they have to obtain it illegally? Why should they have to enter into a culture to obtain it that is illegal? And I agree with that. But more importantly, 4 years ago, I did an end-of-session newsletter that I put into 36,000 newspapers. I got 500 responses back. 75% of those who responded were in favor of the use of cannabis for medical purposes. I did it again a second year. Got the same result. This year, out of 3,000 on my email list, I did a survey, an electronic survey. I received 20% back, got a 72% response in favor of it. So I look at this issue now as an issue that if I have constituent testimonials that are very convincing, I have a voting public in support of it, I have now the obligation to make sure we have a law that is strict and provides only access to those who would be qualified. And I think this law does this. This law means that you have to get your diagnosis from a physician that you've had an ongoing relationship for the past year. You have to only go to a few dispensaries to be able to obtain it. Limited number of uses and illnesses and diagnoses that it can be used for. I asked my own physician if they would use this as a means of treatment, and they said yes. And that was the final thing that made me and convinced me to vote for this. My own physician said she does not prescribe narcotics. She does not prescribe Oxycontin, Vicodin, or any narcotic. But she did have patients that would benefit from this, and it would be something she would recommend. I look at this as an issue that is still under our state rights. We sometimes forget that it wasn't the federal government that created the states. It was the states that created the federal government. We have on the Department of Justice website, it says if a person in a state who has a state-provided provision for medical use of cannabis, it says they won't enforce that current law on those individuals. It is an option, I think, somebody who can benefit from it should be able to receive that benefit. And they shouldn't have to enter into a culture of corruption to obtain it. They should be able to get it and use it within the boundaries of our law. I commend the sponsor on continuing to work for it, putting forth the strictest medical cannabis law in the country, and one that I think goes far enough to make sure that it gets in the hands of those only who are going to receive benefit from it. And I'm going to vote yes. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Zaleski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
He indicates he will.
Representative, you gave a lengthy open on your bill, and while it was substantive, part of the piece that I think we need to be fleshed out a little bit, given the importance of it, is the effect that the bill will have on our driving under the influence of substance law. So indulge me for some questions about that piece of the bill. Isn't it a fact that under your bill, and if you have a possession of the card, of the ability to do this, for all intents and purposes, if you get behind the wheel of a car and there's an incident where you're pulled over, you're guilty of driving under the influence of a controlled substance, correct?
Well, you certainly could be. And so anyone that gets one of these cards and is able to purchase medical cannabis is going to be registered with the Secretary of State. And of course, if you're in an accident, one of the first things the police officer is going to do is check your driving record and check if you own the car, etc. He or she will see that you're a medical cannabis patient. If the officer thinks you're impaired, there's an implied consent that you must do a field sobriety test. This isn't the case with any other narcotic that people are taking today. Oxycontin, Vicodin, morphine, codeine. You could be under the influence of those, and you could be driving under the influence legally or illegally, but the officer cannot make you take a field sobriety test. We have taken this a step further, even though cannabis is not as dangerous, it's not addictive like those other narcotics. You can't OD from it, and yet we've taken the step to make sure that the members of this body, the members of the general public, and law enforcement is all understands that we're very serious about passing a controlled piece of legislation. And so these folks will have to submit to a field sobriety test or lose their license.
So, Representative, are you aware of a case in DuPage County, People versus McPeak?
Why don't you tell me more about it?
So in People versus McPeak, from what I'm told, you had an incident where a driver had smoked cannabis. They had gotten behind the wheel of a car. The officer made observations that the driver smelled like cannabis. The officer observed cannabis in the car and observed a smoking device. Representative, take a guess at what happened in People versus McPeak.
Well, since you raised the issue, I'm going to assume the case was dismissed.
Well, the person was ultimately found not guilty by a court. Your bill, in fact, fixes that incident because, isn't that correct, Representative?
It in fact does, because first of all, you can't drive with cannabis visible in the vehicle. It has to be in a tamper-proof, tamper-apparent container. You cannot smoke in your car even if you're just a passenger. You can't use marijuana even if you're just a passenger. And indeed, if the officer thinks that you're driving under the influence, you will have to take the field sobriety test.
And in fact, by allowing an officer to administer a field sobriety test, we're making a change in the statute that actually will result in more individuals potentially being arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol or under the influence of a controlled substance, when in the past they haven't been culpable. Isn't that accurate?
That is accurate. It actually cleans up a problem with the current statute. In the process of dealing with the medical cannabis bill, we had to dig deeper into this statute, and so we ended up repairing something that needed to be fixed.
So thank you, Representative. To the bill, I've in the past, similar to other speakers, have voted no on this particular piece of legislation. But in my judgment, if we can address a glaring problem in the vehicle code when it comes to driving under the influence of intoxicating substances, and we can do it within the context of providing more safety for our roads and protecting people from hazards by allowing field sobriety tests, which are a deterrent from people for driving under the influence of intoxicating compounds, then we should do it. There may not be things that we all can agree on, but we can agree on public safety. And the gentleman has a pilot program. I think people are crying out for help, and I think that we're doing things to address the public policy in Illinois in a positive, good way that protects the public safety. I urge an aye vote.
The chair recognizes David Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, all bills that we pass in this House start with the phrase, "Be it enacted by the people of the state of Illinois represented in the General Assembly." Now, we pass hundreds of bills in this House year after year, and very few of them, though, really get the attention of the people of the state of Illinois. Very few of them really make what I would call a societal change. Certainly this year, I think same-sex marriage would fall into that category, perhaps gambling. And I think this bill is one of those bills that really makes a societal change. Now, we heard the sponsor describe the provisions of the bill, and it is a very detailed bill. And because of his encouragement, I went out and I did indeed read the whole thing. And we know that states like California and Colorado have medical marijuana bills on their statutes, or medical marijuana statutes on their books, that for all practical purposes are a joke. Of course, Oregon citizens passed a referendum authorizing recreational use of marijuana. So I think it's fair to ask, how does House Bill 1 stack up against the legislation in some of the other states? Let's look at some of the requirements of House Bill 1. What about growing marijuana? Unlike in other states, we're not talking about growing marijuana in the backyard or down in the basement. It has to be grown in one of 22 cultivation centers spread around the state. And how are those cultivation centers regulated? Complete information on the principals and board members involved in those cultivation centers, including a full background check. Every employee has to have a state-issued ID visible at all times, which contains a specific alphanumeric code. All the bylaws and procedures of that cultivation center related to plant monitoring, plant tracking, all record keeping, and the security plan for that cultivation center has to be filed with the department. And they are subject to random inspections 24/7. What about the dispensing organizations? Are we talking about some potheads with fly-by-night storefronts? Not at all. We're talking about organizations that, again, all principals and board members, full background checks, ID cards, and, again, subject to inspection 24/7. What about the patients? In other states, patients can claim almost any real or imagined physical ailment. Under House Bill 1, a patient has to be what's known as a qualifying patient. Well, what's a qualifying patient? Guess what? Full background checks, fingerprinting, issued a secure registry ID card. They must suffer from one of the specific lists of physical conditions listed in this legislation. And they lose their registry card if they give the marijuana or let someone else use the marijuana. Okay? What about the physicians? In other states, quack docs looking to make a quick buck can write a script to virtually anyone. Under House Bill 1, there must be an established patient-physician relationship as defined by the Civil Administrative Code. An examination has to take place, and that examination has to be in person, not done via some sort of remote or telemedicine means. There has to be exact record keeping by the physician. The physician cannot have any direct interest in, be on the board of, or be an employee of a cultivation center or a dispensing organization. What about transporting the marijuana? As the sponsor said, it has to be in a secured, sealed, tamper-evident container. It has to be inaccessible if it's in a moving vehicle. And the restrictions in House Bill 1 go on and on. For example, the marijuana cannot be used in an established public place or in a place in which the public can be expected to show up. We talked about